Hello guys, my name is Anna and I'm from Ukraine, and I vlog daily to keep you updated on the real life situations in my country during this awful war with Russia. And I'm confident we will win, and of course you have to see this process. And actually you are a part of it because your support, your attention, your understanding of the importance of Ukraine and its victory help us a lot. We are very, very grateful for that. Also, I feel like we must have already invented a hashtag for conversations like that. When I don't have electricity, but I have inspiration and I vlog to you from the darkness of Ukraine. And this is a special time. This is a planned electricity outage, but they don't always follow the schedule the best way. And I feel like I have already found my place from which I like vlogging, and it is a different kind of atmosphere. So if you have any ideas, how can we call this type of conversations, let me know. And all the ideas of hashtags are extremely needed and accepted in comments. And today I feel like I want to speak a little bit more about Russian Orthodox Church because I received many questions about that. I had one vlog, but very early at the beginning of my experience, and also much news about Russian Orthodox Church and various searches that take place right now in Ukraine. So once again, I'm not a huge expert in church life and in Russian Orthodox Church. But as Ukrainian, there are some things that I know and follow, and that's what I am going to share with you. Well, for me, Russian Orthodox Church is an aggressive sect. Because a very simple example, even before the start of this war. In 2002, it seems to me, John Paul II, who is my favorite pope, though I'm not a Catholic, visited Ukraine and Kyiv and Lviv, if I'm not mistaken. And many people came to meet with him, and also he was traveling on his car around the streets. On the very next day, Moscow Orthodox Church present in Ukraine decided to organize a procession, walking by all the places where the Pope was, trying to clean the atmosphere because they believe that the Pope on the streets of Kyiv is something dangerous and he might have brought negative energy. So tell me this is not a sect. And it all happened in 2002. Many worse things happening in 2022. But let's look at history. Well, we all know that Ukraine gave birth to Moscow, Novgorod, and some other things as a part of Kyiv Rus. I'm not going to say that we will return back these territories because they are long gone and independent, but Kyiv was the center of Kyiv Rus, and if so many of you like the idea of Slavic brotherhood, so it all came from Kyiv. Kyiv was baptized by Prince Volodymyr, who is a saint now and very much respected in Ukraine, and who was a Ukrainian prince, or Kyiv Rus prince if you like it. He decided to baptize the country back in 980. That was pretty early for many of the Slavic tribes and Slavic states, and pretty soon with Christianity, various cultural norms, traditions, educational norms came to Kyiv Rus. Actually, Kyiv Rus was one of the most literate countries of its time, and the system of schooling was very much well developed, so that children of peasants were also introduced to reading, writing, and all back in the 11th century. That is huge. So, if we think about the birthplace of Orthodox Church for Slavic people, for the descendants of Kyiv Rus, what city do you think about? Well, definitely Kyiv, because people on the banks of Dnipro received baptism the first. So Dnieper River was baptized, and all of that processes started in Kyiv. Moscow did not exist at that time. Then something really bad happened in the 17th century. It seems to be in 1686, when for just one case the head of the Byzantium Church, and we belonged to the Byzantine Church. We were very much under the influence of that empire and that branch of Christianity. So the head of the Byzantine Church allowed Moscow Patriarch to designate, to choose the next Kiev metropolitan. And they quickly annexed this idea, used this opportunity not once but for the next centuries, and in a couple of years pretended that it all came from Moscow, not from Kiev. Very many bad things happened during Soviet era. You know that in 30s many churches were destroyed, priests were persecuted, but many survived and started collaborating with NKVD, KGB and other institutions. I know lots of stories, even in my town, in villages around it, when people confessed something to priests, baptized their children, everything was performed in top secret atmosphere, and then on the very next day they were excluded from the party, from Komsomol, or even fired because someone learned about them practicing religion and religion was forbidden. And we have a separate Soviet myth debunked video about that. Maybe I will connect it to the videos that you can watch. So many priests, to survive, or I don't know why, started cooperating with NKVD and spreading the ideas that were useful for the USSR. So to some extent church was forbidden, but many survived and started cooperating. I'm not saying everybody, because there were lots of really brave priests who opposed the system, but many cooperated. And Moscow Patriarch Kirill is definitely a general of NKVD or KGB or something like that. I'm sure that his life, his experience, his character, his values represent not the religious hero, but I don't know, a veteran of the KGB. He is very much into ruski mir ideas and spreading the ideas of the ruski mir. As we often say, like any ideology needs pillars, and these pillars will be ideas. So for ruski mir, Russian world, it will be Russian Orthodoxy, then Russian language and culture, and common historical heritage. So that is when you look at the history of Ukraine, but only from the Moscow perspective, or the history of Georgia or the history of Lithuania, as Russian lands that are a little bit different from other Russian lands. We know this is totally wrong, and Ruski Mir is very much spread through the Moscow churches. There are many Moscow churches on the territory of Ukraine. Of course, since the beginning of war in 2014, many of them turned to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Also in 2018, some major events took place in this church life, and we had autonomy for a long period of time, but somehow it was not fully confirmed. And in 2018, it was fully confirmed. And Ukrainian church became like fixed, blessed, and supported by the main Orthodox Patriarch Vartholomew. And Russia reacted negatively and went out of this brotherhood of Orthodox churches to demonstrate that it disrespects this decision and that Ukrainian church will always be a part of Russian. But Ukrainian Orthodox Church, from my personal observation, and also I'm a Ukrainian Orthodox, is more democratic, like more positive to people. And Russian is very, very negative. I have, like, for example, they will never allow you enter when you're in trousers, or if you don't have a chief on your head. They are very negative about like photography, mobile phones. You can read something in churches, for example, in my city, you can read notices. Of course, it's impolite to speak the phone in the church, but it is also not normal to write a notice on the doors of the church. Those who will pick up the phone in the temple will be cursed. And one of the centers of the Moscow church that were still occupied by Moscow church is Kiev-Pecherska Lavra, which is a very important monastery, really old, was built by Ukrainian monks. It has a very complicated system of caves, lots of I don't know how do you call it. Personally, I don't like it. They have lots of bodies of mummified bodies of various saints, and you can have an excursion. I had an excursion and I like dreamt for the excursion to end. I did not feel positive about that. This is a very historical place, and it was occupied by Moscow church. And during the war, right now, you could hear songs about Russia. You could hear them speaking that it is a war of brothers and that Ukrainians have to surrender because Russia is always strong, Russia is always wise, and so on. Many Moscow Orthodox temples and churches that were still active in villages of Ukraine, and even in my region they are present, they continued Russian propaganda. And for example, if there is one church in the village and there is a Ukrainian soldier who died heroically on this war, and his family want a service for him to be buried in that village on a graveyard, they close the door of the churches and they curse these families. And for many it's a tragedy, because like it's so difficult to leave your beliefs, like to change them, and for them, for many people, it is a tragedy. Of course, it goes without saying that this is just the result of Russian propaganda that is spread via mouths of Russian Orthodox priests. And it's not only propaganda. When we look at the beginning of this war, in many places like Hostomel, Irpin, those people who actually helped Russian orcs, Russian troops to find locations, to find people who are Ukrainian activists, were Russian Orthodox priests. So they worked as collaborators, and they were giving information about Ukrainian people, and they are guilty in deaths of many, and this is not holy behavior. Also, many Moscow Orthodox churches are places where different weapons are stored. And even in my city, there is a big church. And at the beginning of 2014, when the annexation of Crimea happened and SBU, which is a special service of Ukraine, checked that temple, they have found lots and lots of weapons. And of course, monks and priests cannot explain why do they need weapons in the churches, but once again, if you look at services in Moscow, for example, they bless lots of weapons, and I think it's not normal. In Ukraine, we do have kapelans. These are military priests, but they typically pray and bless and spread with water, holy water, soldiers to strengthen their faith, morale, and many of them are in really hot zones, helping with prayers and confessions and whatever needed. But in Moscow, they bless weapons like missiles, like gun machines, and I think this is like totally wrong. It's not the religious thing. So we have to understand that Russian Orthodox Church is very corrupt. By the way, the cars they drive, and they can never answer where do they get these cars from. The hatred they spread. They also, for example, I have been to that Kiev-Pecherska Lavra that I've told you about. And I wanted to, like in Ukraine, you have this tradition, very similar, I guess, in Europe too, when you lit the candle and you want to give a note for somebody's health so that people will pray for his health. And you know that my father's name is Leonard, which is not very Ukrainian, but come on. And when I have asked them, they told me no. Perhaps he's not Orthodox, perhaps he's not Russian Orthodox, so we're not going to pray. And this is very, like, I think it's absurd. Like, every Christian community is united, and there is no need to focus on differences. We have these cultural differences, we have this branches, but they all pray to one and the same God. And if a person comes and wants you to pray for the health of her father, who are you to say no? I don't think God has something against the name of my father that is not 100% purely Orthodox. So this is why I believe that Russian Orthodox Church is a combination of how do you say it, sect and terrorist group or something, and Patriarch Kirill blessing all of that, supporting the ideas of Putin and Dugin. By the way, Vlad Wexler has a super interesting video about philosophy of Dugin, who is one of the inspirers of Putin, and at the same time it seems like he does not support the Supreme Work anymore. So don't think that any actions or searches on the territory of Russian Orthodox Church has to do something with religious problems or misunderstandings. It is about terrorism, it is about suppressing Russian propaganda, supplying weapons, and giving up positions of Ukrainian armed forces or Ukrainian people during occupation. So it is not a behavior that priests must demonstrate. And for me, it's pretty obvious that Russia does so many evil and somehow perverts everything, perverts its culture, perverts religion, perverts human behavior. And just as they describe us Nazi, they are Nazi. So this church that speaks about brotherly wars is actually the one that invests much into that by spreading the ideas of toxic ruski mir. Thank you for watching. Let me know what do you think about that. Think about hashtag for our dog conversations. Thank you for buying me coffees. Thank you for becoming my patrons. I greatly value that. And thank you for standing with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!